Okay, we're streaming, but I don't know where to. Hold on. Still thinking.
Like it's playing chat roulette or something, link roulette, right? With the links.
Yeah, I think it's streaming to a different site again. Yep. Why? Okay.
We are streaming. I'm gonna just turn my video off.
We are streaming.
But I'm here.
All good. All right, let me paste this link in the chat for the other one. Okay. Hopefully the 7 people watching. And here's, let me put it in here. So this is our actual link because I can't get it to stream to the real link because it makes me reset everything.
Thank you. No worries.
Sorry. Last year it was seamless. This year not so much, but
Should we like post this link to somewhere so people that waiting can
I put it in the chat of the other one of the like original link. And I put it on the website. So hopefully people will find it that way. But yeah, put it anywhere you feel like it needs to go.
I'll just be back in a minute, in a second.
Okay. Oh, I need to fix the other place I need to put it is in the schedule. Oh, good. It looks like people are making their way to the stream. It's more than just me watching it now. Did last time was I also deleted the original one. So then it's- Melody, have you heard from Viola at all?
No, no. Should I email? I can do that.
Or some really good typing sound.
Yeah. And then you're any overextension on the keys.
Right, yeah.
I realized how loud that must have been.
Good though. It was really, yeah,
Made us speak and didn't good.
satisfying noise.
I know some people that are into like mechanical keyboards, and like Press, one of my friends was like, I want a keyboard that had 50% less sound. I'm like, why? Sometimes I like the feedback of the keys sometimes.
Mhm. The click clack.
Oh, we just got a email from Viola. They don't have a Zoom link.
I accidentally pushed archive instead of answer, and now I can't find the email.
I got it.
Okay, thanks. I really can't find it.
Cool. All right. Well, hopefully they'll pop in and then we can get started. Since it's 9 o'clock now.
Welcome with that.
Mhm. Just wait a couple more minutes, maybe. Kofi, while we're waiting, do you want to talk about your reflections on yesterday's session? Put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, it was cool with between the community thing, which was like, 'cause that was a lot about live coding humans.
Mm,
So there's always a bias in live coding humans because humans are computers but are not computers at the same time. So it is always fun of thinking of how we bring live coding to non-coders and also vice versa. And with systems explorations, a lot of interesting things like knitting instead of typing as a live code. That is good because knitting is mathematical. Shout out to Alex McLean because if you guys know about Alpaca Salon, that was the whole point where there's a lot of patterns in textiles, in juggling and all that. So it reminded me of that, of how like you can code without a computer because code is just math and math is life and life is math. And also coding on cell phones because I do like coding on cell phones. And it is sometimes we do forget that like people have mobile devices, and it did remind me of like one experience where I had to like improvise that because I did a workshop that no one brought their computers, but everyone has smartphones. So then it's like, okay, but you can do this on a phone. So always nice to think about how like for some people they bypass the whole laptop industry or even now tablets, right? Like a lot of kids don't use laptops. They learn from tablets. So I don't even know that, like, typing and mouse work, a lot of kids have to learn that later. They don't have that quick Zoe, what's up X-rays, if anyone knows what I'm talking about.
for sure, yeah. Yeah, I always think about that. Like, we call it a phone, but it's actually a mini computer that we carry around. It's actually barely
Yeah,
a that's
it's
like the
barely
least
a
useful.
phone. So true.
Yeah, when you want it to be an actual phone, you have to get one of the really, they don't even let you do that anymore. My mom really wanted an actual phone. Just,
Right,
she has to have a smartphone.
right,
And they-
exactly. You have to have the computer. Only computers.
Well, everything's a computer, right? I don't know, like you saw someone recently put like the game Doom on a pregnancy stick. 'Cause, like the display screen is it is a CPU. Like even microwaves are computers. So I think like everything is a computer in a way, but it's not a computer because it's really just one and zeros and all that stuff.
All right, now that we're all here, should we get started, Kofi?
Yes, we should.
Right.
Uh,
Melody, are you doing the time this session?
Yes, I can.
Or do you want, I can do it if you want.
Can
I can.
you?
All right.
all right. So we have all that in order. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the fourth edition of the HLCI Hybrid Live Coding Interface. We had two wonderful sessions yesterday in Community and Humanity as one and System Explorations. But since we're talking about live coding, math, and hybridity, what better way to talk about this stuff but the worlds that we build? And in this session, we have various aspects of world building. And now to start it off, we would have LKK speaking about live coding as a community gathering and as an extended gong ensemble.
Yes, thank you. Can everyone hear me well? Can I get like thumbs up or something? Awesome. Thank you. All right. So um um on behalf of Ilekeka, I'm gonna share the video that Gang and I recorded in advance. So bear with me while I'm sharing. All right. let me know if you don't hear anything. I can pause and restart the video again, but here you go. Keep research-based group. Sorry, we are Ilekeka. We are collaborative research-based group consists of artists, including me, Nisha, Dotong. You also can call me Fame.
Hi, my name is Geng Chakat, Geng Kan Kha.
And today we're gonna talk about our project JIT Extended Gong Ensemble. It's a multi-channel audio and visual network live coding, collaborative sound making, and an extended branch from our process-oriented, ever-evolving project series called JIT.
JIT Extended Gong Ensemble is inspired by the community gathering Gong Ensemble, where each person participating may have only one or two gongs. Hence, collaboration is a big part of creating this ritual music. Everyone has to contribute to make this music work, thus eliminating the role of dominant force and underlining the agency of each individual who participates.
We also invite audience to participate with file objects, whether it's keys in their pocket, tin can, or some other metal objects that they can easily find. The participatory element become really crucial to the extended Gong Ensemble as accessible point for audience to make sound with us. Community that they lost their original gong, that they use this using their collective memories to tune it and use it as a gong as well.
The sentiment of network gong is to democratize interaction with each live coding performer. The performance is created with specific frequencies tied to Southeast Asia sound cultures. It uses these tunings as a constraint to create a ritual music performance with melodies and rhythms spread out among live coders. Collaborative live coders are connected through a MIDI network that share the same clock, so we can perform together in time. In an essence, live coding Gong Ensemble is also borrowing the Hocketing technique to improvise and create this ritual music. Culture has always been exchanged, migrated, and evolved, but in an attempt to avoid colonization by creating a centralized national identity, Siamese chord music has become a part of this new identity and spread throughout modern Thailand. There is also some written evidence that the central Thai government bans folk instruments and music. Jit Pumisak also criticized the ignoring of this folk music and communal music that was forced by the Thai elite and the status quo in his series of essays, Cemetery of Thai Music.
And the last thing is the visual. The extended Gong Ensemble is always an audio visual project. What you see here is the screen capture from the live coding visuals from the past performance, which an assembling of performing documents using words extracted from Jit Pumisak, the Cemetery of Thai Music, that criticizing Thai music itself. Also, you can see some figure and footages. Juxtaposed here is the archive footages from the Cold War era, which is a lot of it is propaganda. We wanted to present the idea of the Southeast Asia tuning itself that have been oppressed. We wanted to also create like the new iteration of the visual, which is our idea is more community approach. So we are been working on the visual that have like the crowdsourcing text from different communities and live as we performing. We want the audience or everyone else to be able to contribute to like the small data set and keep it as an archive for future performance as well.
We hope that we can learn from this project a new mode of collective expression and navigate our life together in this modern time with care. We hope that this project could be an example or inspiration to act and move forward with inclusivity in mind. Like Jit has said in his essay, we should add as many voices as we can.
That's it. Thank you so much for listening to us and tuning in to this talk. Thank you.
And I think we have some times for question. So yeah, so this one is a little deep, but because you said you're thinking of how it can be archived, and I know gongs were first mentioned in 5th century AD, but they tend to go back to 2nd millennium BC. So we're talking maybe 4,000 years of gongs. And now you're trying to archive in a digital space. And since you're trying to build culture, this might be a tough one, but since we're doing world building, where do you see this going in like the next millennium, like year 3023, someone encounters the gong ensemble? What do you want to be preserved in the thought of what you're trying to do?
So there is like I think like main two different things, which is like I talking about like the archive at the end is toward the text, which is presenting in a visual. And our hope is to include instead of like keep the identity as like Thai, as we inspire from like Thai writers and identity, we wanted to let go of that and have more community approach, include more languages into the visual part. In terms of the gong sounds, the thing is that we encounter to begin with is a lot of instruments are like even like the Thai pedagogy teaching in music, Thai music is based on 12 tune Eurocentric standard system. And even that there is like a standard version of like the Thai chord music that's 7 equal. That still not include all like the music or like the sound from different communities that they actually don't have like the standardized tuning. But instead of that, that's why we use the word sound culture instead of tuning, to kind of like have like a different voices from different communities. So before we perform, every time we will talk about like different communities that we inspire from, or use the tuning or sound system from, and use, and this actually the sound of the gong that you heard in a performance is actually the synthesized gong sound, which is not a real sample, like not a sampling sound. So that's the essence of like kind of like transform like the physical or the form of it into frequency data and to the digital. So let's say that. Yeah.
I think that's great, especially like since we're bringing ancient to digital to post-digital. So it's very nice that you are thinking about a whole holistic way of keeping it Thai, but representing the many cultures within that culture. So I think that's great. Thank you very much. And in the end, we will have more discussions on that.
Totally.
Next, thank you. Next up, we have Viola. Hopefully I said it right. And Viola would be talking, well, Viola has two presentations this round, and the first one is live coding and site specificity, exploring collaborative immersive performance. You can.
Hello everyone, my name is Viola. Thank you, Elekeka, for your presentation. And yeah, I have two things to present today. The first thing I'm gonna share is, I'm gonna share my slides now. Okay. So this presentation is called Live Coding and Site Specificity, Exploring Collaborative Immersive Performance. And mostly I want to use this opportunity to talk about a recent performance. Oh, very loud. A recent performance I put together at LiveCode NYC in collaborations with Wavefarm and Festival Tanami in Chile. And we put together this show called Anti-Patterns, incorporated 6 musicians, 3 visualists, and kind of manifested into an hour, actually an hour and 30 minutes long live stream. And I want to talk about just kind of like the intention behind this project, how it came to be, and kind of like in what way that this is like a different, I guess, interface or world building tool that we can use in live coding. So I was commissioned by Wavefarm for this project for this festival in Chile called Festival Tsunami. And their entire prompt for this year's festival is called situated listening. And you would define situated listening as to listen extends beyond the listening ear, accounting for the totality of the body and its environmental and contextual positions. For me, I think this manifests in understanding what environment we're in, kind of what venues that we're playing these shows at, and also just thinking about who we're with. So it's kind of like subverting a little bit of like what's a usual live coding show, or like in New York, kind of like we do a lot of typical algorithm performances that I'm going to talk about a little bit later, where it's usually like based on acts. But I really want to put together an event that just like feels like an hour-long soundscape that's really immersive, and audiences become a part of the performance as well. So before I jump into the project itself, I had a little bit of theater and performance arts background, and I always see a lot of like discourse in this art-site relationship in performance art. And specifically, I'm very intrigued by site specificity and also site-specific immersive theater as a concept. Many people would define site-specific practices as to articulate exchanges between the work of art and the places in which its meanings are defined. So it's not just like a locational concept. A lot of times people also use it to talk about situations. It's to talk about like political environments and to talk about the community we're within. And I think Elekeka's performances is also a good example of just like not only looking to historical and cultural context, but also kind of looking for the political context in which we perform at. And there has been a long history of site-specific performances, and like that manifests in many different ways, and people are defining them in a broader sense, I think, beyond just like location itself. I think notably, because we're all like digital artists and we work with digital mediums, there has also been a long history of like trying to define a digital mediums or mixed medium at site. In this book, Entangled Technology and the Transformation of Performance, the writer wrote, "Who performs and where should our media saturated and accelerated gaze fall? Have the architectronic of the projected image sufficiently overwhelm the human body so that the screen itself now becomes the new site and body of performance?" None of these concepts I feel like we're exploring right now are new. For example, John Cage had this performance in 1969 where basically they had, I have notes here. It's a 5-hour long image and sound performance that uses computer commands to execute, I think 7 harps, 200 something computer generated tapes, and like 64 slide projectors and 8 film projectors. And it's this immersive performance where the concept is that it's unidirectional, that audience are encouraged to witness and move in and out and fully move and articulate their own experience. So I feel like I'm very much working in the line of a lot of these like pioneers that do these kind of audiovisual performances from a more installation or performance art kind of point of view. So now how does that relate to live coding? So I've been reflecting a lot on like just the standardized live coding performances or like algorithm formats. Obviously, my experience is very limited within the United States and mostly like the New York scene. How I think we do a lot of like algorithms where we have two performers, right? Like you see a visualist and a musician, and you project your code and visuals on your background, and the audience stand in front of you. And I think a lot of times, so many of these topics come into play where, where does the gaze fall? What directions are people paying attention? How does the collaboration manifest? And how do we engage with the audience? Because I think we're all creating sites with our audiovisual experiences. I kind of sometimes want to challenge this notion of like, it has to be a parallel position, or it has to be two performers, it has to be only an audio-visual collaboration. And I know, again, people have been working along these lines for many years, and I think this is kind of like one of my first foray of like just like really trying to define this performance as a very highly collaborative, immersive performance. So yeah, we hosted this event at Hex House. It's a space in East Williamsburg, New York, Brooklyn, that's mostly a co-working space, and they host a lot of events and stuff. So most of this like setup and formation is informed by what this space already is like and what we can utilize in this space, thus site specific. And before the performance, we really set our intentions for this performance. Notably, we want to play with the quality of the space itself, how people's movement and position will change their perception of the performance. And I really want it to be kind of like a relay kind of performance, also because we're doing a live stream, so there's no setup breakdown time. So thinking about like performance like overlapping with each other, and then like really just creating like this like big soundscape that people can jam together. And also different ways to engage with the audience, because it's not either a live stream recorded act or a live performance. This is kind of like more of like a studio recording kind of situation where we do have live audience and we can engage with them and they become a part of the performance. Meanwhile, we also have audiences listening from the outside. And also before the performance, we talked amongst ourselves, what are the themes that we explore as artists? And people talk about feedback. What does it mean to care for a space or ourselves? What does it mean to define and reconstruct music and performances? What does murmuration mean? Just like flocking in space. So these are all of the things that we were playing with. So yeah, we use this collaboration tool called Flock. It's a P2P web browser-based collaborative tool that allow people to code different things in different languages. I think it supports Hydra for visuals. It also supports like Foxdot, Tidal Cycles, Strudel, and a lot of different things. Oh my God, I don't have time. Very quickly. And we also explored different prompts of interaction. We have our visualist Void playing a game in real time and like inviting audiences to play the games together. I had this middle point where I had an intermission where I invited audience to like stand up and walk around, and then using a lot of the movement prompts that I've curated over the years that I do like movement theater. And obviously there's a lot of like tech setups and thoughts behind all of this, and I would just really want to appreciate all the artists that came out and supported us and also participated in this. As you can see, we all used different toolkits, and kind of the space is set up to be able to prioritize everybody, and then we really just like went into circles and each person played while also jammed together. Yeah, I also have this meticulously planned thing because producing. Cool. And now we just have some images. The streams recordings are available. I can give a link in the chat. And that's it. I want to thank everybody. Whoa.
Thank you very much for that presentation. It's time, but don't worry, I have many questions, especially since I saw that stage design thing. So that's very cool because that's an aspect we low-key don't talk a lot about, I feel, in life coding, but stage design is very important because performance and space. So we are going to have more conversations on that. Once again, thank you for that. All right, next we have Katerina, who is going to be exploring the concept of feasibility within the Ged Gedake Experimente. I think I butchered it this time, and experimental design theory, creative response, and live coding.
Thank you, Kofi. So let me share. Okay. Can you hear me well? I'm gonna assume yes. Okay. So, welcome. I'm Katerina, and like Kofi said, I'm talking about exploring concept feasibility, Gedankenexperimente, experimental design theory, creative responses, and live code. So this talk is a combination of reflections and speculations based off of my past experiences, and it's created with the hope of inciting discourse. So I'm Katerina. When I live code, I perform under the stage name Cougars Are Cats Too. And I'm relatively new to the live coding scene. I've dabbled with live code in New York City and in Bangor, Maine in 2019, but then got re-involved through interactions with the live coding community in New York City over the past year. And I'm based out of Westchester, New York. So that doesn't mean I haven't been involved in other creative events. So I've helped organize various events, instructed, made music, danced, and coded. I'm an intermediate artist, specifically one with a heavy STEM background and extensive flute and dance experience. My work is not media specific. I chose my media based off of the experiences I intend to create. I aim to facilitate others in finding joy, belonging, acceptance, and connection through my work. And I view live coding as a new tool in my arsenal. So algorithms and collaborating through live code are new media to incorporate in my work. They differ from some of my past media choices in that these require my presence and active engagement in creation in front of an audience while showing the inner workings of code. Oops, sorry. Okay. So why did I start live coding again? It's because I wanted to connect with others using similar media in my geographic vicinity. And some of the strengths I find live coding brings to my art and how it's a great way to prototype quickly and iterate. It's an easy way to collaborate with other coders, to incorporate public failure and recovery. And it's a way to perform with computers, plus the focus of this talk. I'm trying to use it to user experience test that algorithm. So what do I mean by testing? To understand my thoughts on testing, let's dive into my past. My undergraduate experience involved taking various physics classes. These classes introduced me to purely speculative experiments conducted because it is impractical or impossible to conduct an experiment in part or in full. So the professors called this idea Gedankenexperimente, or thought experiments. They mentioned it being spread by Albert Einstein through the world of physics. And we learned about them because we were taking a special relativity class, and it would be impossible for us to send rhinoceros flying through space at 3/5 speed for experimental purposes. And my friends and I, we continue to conduct speculative experiments in our free time. For example, during dinner, and calculating how many pieces of bread we could stack between a specific point of campus and the moon. And going on, I later studied how to design rigorous experiments. Experimental design theory allows one to calculate how many tests need to be run before one can be, say, 99 or 98 or some other percentage certain that a specific situation is going to occur. And given a correctly designed experiment, one can physically test the subset of possible variable combinations and still be sure of success. So we can also use computer simulation to test expensive endeavors such as launching rockets, which can reduce the number of failed physical tests and the cost of sending up the rocket eventually. So I was introduced to the more artistic side of supposition and experimentation through creative responses, rapid practices, prompts, social dancing, and jam sessions. I find that completing creative responses ends up reminding me of some lessons from my test-heavy past. But what is a creative response? So given a set of content, say a set of readings, a talk, etc., a creative response is a way of investigating the content and exploring your artistic goals simultaneously. Due to my personal interests, my creative responses tend to involve different ways of inciting participation and my monitoring the participants' responses. In an effort to better understand how to help participants facilitate joyful exploration of my work, I began to take notes after installations. I supplemented my personal observations by asking for feedback after installations. This had less frequent but more detailed and less speculative response. And then I began to implement note-taking after live coding shows and realized that I could use them as grounds for small sets of crowd-based experimentation. So this led to purposeful observations. And recently, I've set out with the objective of viewing the audience's reception to certain aspects of my performances. Why? Well, I normally work in isolation and do not have access to testers. So an algorithm provides a platform from which to test small sections of the larger work in progress in front of an audience. The audience contains a mix of highly knowledgeable and first-time observers, so this makes for an interesting set of advice and feedback. And then beyond observations, live code performances yield material, for example, sound files that I could use in future work. So my question for you is on the screen, but basically I believe that I am not the only one to consider live coding or the environs of an algorithm as an avenue to test something else. And I'm interested in starting a conversation where we discuss ideas such as, what concepts have you used live coding to explore? What non-live coding projects or experiences has it helped develop? How has a live coding experience become part of iterating through a larger performance or another work? Does this idea make you uncomfortable? And if so, how and why? Thank you. Feel free to reach out on these platforms, or if you're on the Live Code New York Discord about this, and I'll get back to you when I can to continue the discussion.
Thank you for that, Katharina. We have 3 minutes for questions, so I want to see if there's any questions, but I have a question. So it seems that in your world building, there's a lot of math and physics in it. You know that saying, it's not rocket science, but literally we saw like rockets and test design. So for that, we know that math and physics can be limitless, right? Whereas you talked about failure, and we know one of the constraints of live coding is that since you're improvising things that you're testing sometimes in real time, you're most likely going to fail, right? Like mathematically, of course. So how do you balance this notion that you're going with something that's rigorously trying to prevent failure in conjunction with something that like you're probably going to fail?
So I actually take inspiration from my past with social dancing and with jam sessions. And I view it as you have to practice. Like you have to practice before going on stage. Okay, maybe this experiment will fail, but you have to practice how might you recover. What are some ways you might recover? So I make sure I practice relatively consistently before I perform.
So your confidence interval and p-values are quite low, right? I guess.
Yeah.
Well, confidence high, and then yeah.
I'm confident in my ability to recover.
Yeah. Which I think is probably an interesting world build within live coding, right? Because we have to face that up front. And you were talking about a lot of designing and also bringing the past, and I realized there's a cohesive theme that everyone so far has mentioned a thing from their past that world build into their live coding. So I'm asking you, where do you think brings from your mathematical background, science background, what do you think that has aided in your ability to do your world building within live coding?
Okay. So my mathematical background has aided my world building and live coding. Um, it so when I set out to solve a math problem, or really solve a science problem, anything, it I was led to approach things by finding sources, seeing what other people have done in the past, and so I think those same techniques, you first try those, then you do small tests here, small tests there, see what combination of things works, what combination of things doesn't work. I've started doing that, and so that's been incorporating to how I build my performances. Not necessarily the same as how I'm evaluating like the concept I truly wanted to test. It's more that part goes more into how am I structuring my overall performance.
Yeah.
Thank
Oh,
you.
wow. And you were on type as well. So thank you very much. And as you know, we're going to be talking more later. Thank you very much for that. And now we are going to shift gears because we've been talking about gongs, we've been talking about site-specific and thought experiments, and now we are going to have a video from Daniel where we're going to go into the world of HTML flowers. So, and there's a video, so I think someone's going to share screen. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Daniel. I was born and raised in New York. I currently live in Brooklyn, and I'm pre-recording this video because by the time you're watching this, or when you're watching this right now, I'll be working in person at work right now. So I use they them pronouns, and for more context, I have actually very little technical experience with live coding. I've I've installed like title cycles. I've read maybe like a bit of like the beginner tutorials that's available on I think the website that Alex McLean runs or partially runs. And yeah, I have some coding experience. I used to know like some JavaScript, but then like I forgot it all after not using it for like 2 years. But I don't know. I've always really been interested by or in like the coding community, and how DIY it feels. Um, Despite me like currently simultaneously being really like intimidated by um, just all the technical aspects of it. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like when I saw the announcement for this whole like symposium thingy, I just had this like half-baked idea in my mind, and I figured I'd share it, where I feel like it'd be kind of sick if we could somehow incorporate live coding tools and like adjacent um, to make like I don't know like websites. Kind of how there's like I forget what you call them, like in like the game development world you have like there's like these little like competitions or events where you try and make a game within like a week or something. I forget what they're called. I can't remember off the top of my head. So I feel like it'd be kind of cute to have those kinds of events in regards to like website building, where you can just make like cute little like static HTML/CSS/JavaScript based websites where like instead of like whatever you're live coding triggering sound samples, you're kind of triggering like website element based samples, and like as you're like coding, I don't know, like I guess like the sky's the limit, right? Like your imagination's the limit with that. Like you can a bunch of like different forms or buttons or like grids or tables could form, and like I don't know. I feel like visually it could be kind of interesting or a trip. Um, just because I feel like again I'm not like super technically oriented. Like I've kind of gotten into web development just like I don't know, just out of boredom. Um, I wouldn't say I'm um, like I didn't major in CS and I don't have like a tech job or anything like that, but just from like a user layman's perspective, I do feel like a lot of the internet is rampant with this really like design oriented, like really heavy, like highbrow, just like taking yourself like really seriously kind of vibe. Um, and I don't know, I feel like it'd be sick to kind of treat website design from this perspective of, okay, like this doesn't have to make sense, like we can just be really raw with it and like kind of just like go crazy. Um, and I feel like that's kind of like, at least from my perspective, that's what I find really, or partially really interesting about the musical aspect of live coding, where you know, like I know like some people have used like fractal equations or like, I don't know, like wild stuff, and I feel like it'd be sick to apply that from like a, again, yeah, like a website design perspective. Um, I think that's like pretty much all I have to say about that. Sorry, I don't have any like fancy like PowerPoint presentations or like visual things to offer, but you can say hi to my cat, Freddy. Hey. All right, he's not saying hi, but all right, I'm gonna end this video now. Bye.
So Daniel's not here, but there's a lot of interesting concepts that I felt were brought up. And I feel like this is thinking of the past to bring into the future. Because earlier in like tech, if you like ever used the internet during the 90s or zero zeros, websites were wild. You had anything from GeoCities to MySpace. And what was cool about MySpace and GeoCities, people were just making anything. Colors were clashed. There was no concept of color theory in some cases, and in other cases, color theory was it. And I remember that I think that's one of the aspects that even brought me into more into computing, because you also had the same thing with like MSN Plus, where people would have different fonts. And I remember that's where a lot of the data about Comic Sans, is that a good design theory, or these little games like Yahoo or even torrents back then, because you had to keep designing. So I really think there's that big connection of, wow, let's just make individual flowers, or even I'm in cat base in Canada, so even snowflakes, because the thing about a snowflake, they say that every crystal of a snowflake is unique. So what if we live coded that aspect of unique, where instead of just thinking about the algorithms in a tech way, what about if we were able to just code to bring out our personality? So I think even Daniel kept saying, I'm not a programmer, I'm not tech. One thing that we often conflate with programming is that before you program, as explained many times, you got to think about where you're coding. You got to think about the history, but you also got to think about the design and elements before, because programming and live coding doesn't start or end with the code you're doing. It comes from your mental state, your emotional state, your cultural state. And I think bringing that perspective of, let's have a jam session where we're just making websites and explore our feelings, is a interesting idea for a jam session. And also the accessibility of it, the creativity of it. And I think it's like a nice way to bring that in. All right, so we're going to discuss about that later as well. And now we bring back Viola. We bring you back on for live code, live coding comedy and computational humor.
Hello, I'm back. Yes, okay. Full disclosure, this is gonna be a very, very silly presentation. And I think a lot of the concepts are not like fleshed out, but I'm gonna do it anyways. This is called Live, Laugh, Code. I've been talking to people about live coding comedy for a little bit because I didn't introduce myself in my last presentation. This one's a little shorter. So my name is Viola He, and I come from kind of a theory slash performance art background, and I've also done some dancing, and I do stand-up comedy in New York sometimes. So I think a lot of times this is like a questionable approaches of someone that comes from a very multidisciplinary performance arts background. And I often, I think, attempt to merge these practices or like think about what are the transferable or relatable things that I can take from each other. And I think today, a lot of these like thoughts and experiences come from either doing stand-up comedy, improv comedy, or coming from jazz dancing, which is another thing that I've done prior to going into live coding. And I think this session is really interesting because a lot of us are just I guess non-tech workers or people who are self-taught, people who like came from not a tech background, but we can bring kind of all of these practice into our live coding practices. And I think that's super cool. So computational humor, I think a lot of times is like defined as like a study whether computer can understand, interpret, or generate humor. Like I've had multiple attempts of like asking ChatGPT for like a programmer joke and it just like doesn't do it, or it's like really silly. But I think what's really cool is that we are humans with computers. So we have a more organic control over humor in regards to computers, I guess. And a prime example would be this is a meme from the Live Code NYC server when we hosted an event called, oh, your headphone is dying. Can you still hear me? We hosted an event called Queer Coded this past June. It's an all queer live coding performance, and someone posted this meme in our server, which is cute. So jumping into kind of the things that I'm like trying to explore, one big thing about comedy is that we do a lot of crowd works. A crowd work is usually when like someone hosts or like some people's approach is just more like audience interaction based. You will like thank the host, you will ask the audience questions, you ask them for names, and you stare at them, and then you tell some silly jokes and you roast them. So sometimes what I do in terms of like crowd working or like engaging with the audience, code annotation is a interesting medium for as like an interactive device. In almost all of my performances, I try to use the annotation like live to like talk to people. And people seem to really enjoy that because again, a lot of our audiences, I think, also come from a programming background. And I think the code itself doesn't mean much to them other than like aesthetics. And when they see these annotations, sometimes I explain what I'm doing. Sometimes I tell them a little bit background of the track I'm about to play. Sometimes I just be like, hi, how's everyone doing? And they're like, people are really happy about it. And sometimes like I draw some ASCII art. And I think it makes like really accessible. This is a performance this past month at Brooklyn Art House where you can see I'm like live commenting on the code and kind of trying to do some interaction. And this is exactly what I would say when I host a comedy show. I'll like ask everyone how they're doing. I will introduce myself. And in this case, I introduce my partner. He will say, let's give it up for the co-host. I also attempted to ask everyone's names and have them yell it out, which they did. And I think I've done another version where after they yell it out, I also roasted them, but there are different approaches, and I've attempted this a couple times, which I think is always just like a silly little segments that I can incorporate into my sets. And people had always come up to me and told me that they had like really enjoyed having these kind of intermission in the middle of your music playing. So there's that. Okay, I'm just kind of gonna skip this. In comedy, we have this thing called a punchline. But I think what I want to show is I think a lot of times we can use repetition as kind of like a device to create this punchline. And I actually want to show this clip from a swing dancing competition because like I see a lot of correlation in live coding performances and or practice, and also in jazz dancing that I used to do, because both are these kind of like subculture that's like rooted in structured improvisation, and both are kind of very like repetition or pattern based. And you will see what I mean in this. We're gonna be seeing this this dancer is called Remy, and he's doing this completely improvised bit with live music in the background. And like I think about this like little blips all the time where he repeats the same movement 3 times, and the fourth time when you're expecting him to do something, like he does something else, but then he still gives you like a satisfying resolution. And how much that just like reminds me of like kind of like a classic comedy structure where you would do like, you know, you would give it a string of things and it will be thing 1, thing 2, and as you're expecting thing 3, that you will give you something unexpected. And that is kind of a good way to use repetition to call for like a punchline. And I actually had an example, but I can't show it now. But like I always think about how like I use tidal cycles for live coding, and tidal cycles is it's cycle based and it's a patterning language. And so much of times I think we think about especially I think when we first started, at least when I first started, I think a lot of my frustration was I feel like tidal cycles is a little bit too cycle based, and sometimes like you're stuck in playing this loop, and then it's like difficult to opt for change. But then if I think back on how like using these kind of repetition can call for a humorous response, and it's like a very like organic in the moment kind of responses from like playing in this like cycle-based rhythm, then there are opportunities that emerges when you can play something for a very long time and like you have this sudden change, and using that as a humor device. Cool. So I guess what's next? I think there are still so much that I want to think about and explore in terms of like what does humor mean in live coding contexts. Also, like I don't really know if there anyone else doing like this type of explorations or work, and if anyone know or if anyone is seeing this conference and want to talk, I'm available. And I think what I kind of want to work towards is like this solo performance where I can like actually like merge dance movements, comedy and live coding in one thing. But like I don't know if it's feasible. I don't know when that's gonna happen, but we march on and we hee hee ha ha through life. That's it. Thank you. Ooh, I never gave my handles, but it's fine.
Yeah,
I'll
no,
put it here.
that was very great. And this is a self-plug, but I actually have done a couple of computational humor stuff before. So that's why I was very interested in this one, actually, and it just worked out. And everything you said, it does go back to like being the site, because even if people don't understand the code, it seems that people understand repetition, because the human brain loves making patterns. So one of the things I love doing was, I remember one time I made people laugh because I started from the number 1 and I just kept doing 0.1, 0.001, and then go what? And then people started realizing, and then I'm like, what number do you think I'm going to do? They said 0. And then I just started like matching the keys. So everyone got a laugh at that. So when you were talking about setting up the punchline and all that, it really did resonate, because it's like, yeah, we're live coding improv, but it's like like we have a lot of people that have done dance, and the one thing they always say is the routine, everyone doesn't. So you can always break out of the cycle and then go back. So I do feel there's a lot of things with comedic timing and also performance timing. So yeah. Um, and also Kate, who's also like co-chairing and co-hosts this thing, also has done some comedic dance bits too. So you are in good hands. And I would like well, since it's time where everyone you can put your camera on, we're going to have a group discussion. Yeah, and I saw there was a lot of chatter about how everyone feels like the pieces merge. So in the so in the form of live coding, I guess I'm gonna put y'all on the spot from one of the other presenters. What do you think you can bring that they talked about within your own world building?
So, one thing I noticed was that both Viola and Alekleca have said that they incorporated the audience very well into their work. And so far, I haven't done that as a live coder. I've been watching the audience, but I haven't actually incorporated the audience. And in the case of Viola's first talk, there was a really large ensemble of coders. So those are both things that one day I want to also do. As someone who some of my first introduction to the art was through like dance classes and through music classes, like musical ensemble, playing in bands and that sort of thing. I really do want to use the computer more as like sometimes I want to use it more as an instrument that's not just a solo instrument and like maybe you're playing with one partner or another partner, but just like multiple people. So that's one thing I want to incorporate more. Um,
I love the idea of Viola bringing like all like the data and things that like size specific into the performance, because in a way that many thing is happen during like the live coding performance is like improvisation, and a lot of factor that happening definitely influence like how we decide to write like line of code and feedback loop in that. I think yeah, that is really interesting aspect that I would love to bring in.
Yeah, and I think also kind of relate to that. I know Electrica kind of like work not only like within culture context, but also just kind of like microtonal sound, right? Like I like when you talked about how like Western music standards and like how we understand like an octave versus like how all these cultures have already been practicing, where like that is not the case. And I think this is kind of also my intention of like doing this event and calling it anti-patterns, because I think a lot of times like live coding is about like embracing these like segments, fractals of things that like these like Western standards or theories don't really like encompass, or have been ignored for years. And we have these computational tools that are allowing us to be able to do that. And I think with people like Katarina who have like a more scientific background, like this is like a really good tool to combine together, and like we can use that to produce counterculture, to produce social change.
No, that was good because I saw a lot of feedback. So I'm like, everyone seems to be going, and we have a question from Alex, which I think is going to be very good because when in conjunction with what Daniel was saying, because I think everyone here, if I'm not mistaken from a read, doesn't have like a original major in computer science. So I think this is a great question. Can live coding events be a good place to experiment with different ways of relating to each other? If so, is live coding a kind of counterculture?
Yes. I've always said that I think live coding is counterculture. And I think this is to just basically to see live coding beyond algorithms, but also like I think algorithm itself is also a counterculture. I remember I was talking to Alaida Sun, who is a generative artist, and then she was talking about their first experience with live coding YC events and how that kind of felt like almost like folk art, because we are wielding these tools of the digital age to create these expressions of our own, that are outside of these like capitalist intentions of what programming can be used with. And I think that in itself has like a lot of anti-establishment ideas built in. And us by creating these things together and relating to each other as humans, even though we're using computer tools, I think it's indeed creating counterculture for sure.
Yeah, I agree to that. I also don't have background in CS as well. But all my whole life working like with media, and I think media and everything. Um I like the question I think you asked earlier, like how your background and what your experience kind of like form you as who you are, and making like creating the work as like rebuilding the world as we kind of like us present our way of seeing. So I think, well, um live coding or like art in general, I think is like really, sorry, I got like so nervous. I'm gonna pause a little bit. um I think like in a way that like the art in an older form, not like the computational art, or like not the art with the computer, have like a different power structure also. I think like with like the digital age, and also like computer art, like with the coming of internet, we have more fluid in terms of relationship of the power structure. And I think that somehow like there is a many way that we can hack and being fluid. So like I totally agree with like the culture. Yeah, hope that makes sense.
So I'm sitting here trying to decide what I think a counterculture is. And I guess I'll probably side with both of you and say it's probably a little bit of a counterculture. I don't know. The idea of, so I don't know, like I said, I see live coding as a tool, and it's like, really, what do you want to make of the tool, right? So if you're interested in exploring different ways of relating to each other, I am. I hope others are too. I don't know. I think we could make some really interesting work. And truthfully, some of my favorite performances I've seen have been focused around, say, having multiple performers interact in different ways, or how the audience and the performers interact, or interacting with something that happened in the past. And so therefore, or I guess the data from something that happened in the past, it's not quite interaction, but responding to something that happened data-wise in the past. It's I don't know. I think it could create different. It's just another tool to see how can we understand things, and in this case, how can you understand the relationship between people? Yeah.
No, that was a very good question, Alice, and great answers, y'all. And I guess, oh, we still have some time, so I'm gonna ask another outball question because I don't like to be generic. It's not in me. So we're talking about world building. So, and this is hybrid live coding. So let's be speculative. What is like an improbable live coding scenario that you can think of within your framework or another framework that you would like to see realize? And y'all can like, oh, or small, depending on the thing.
Okay, so this one is probably going to be kind of unpopular, but so as a social dancer, there are some things I like about social dancing. One of them is that it like provides a specific structure of how you have to interact with people, and also like specific ways where it's like socially acceptable to say like touch someone. And so I'd be interested in either of those concepts happening. I saw a very cool art project once made by, actually I can't remember who made it, but like the whole point was like the work didn't work until like two people sat next to each other and like touched each other's somehow, like shoulders, hands, whatever, knees, like they had to do something. And the work didn't work until then. So I'm kind of curious about like what we could do with something like that, or like if there was more of a just someone was very specific in the formatting of like, this is how the performance is based off of a set of rules that it's this is how people are going to relate to each other during this particular performance, and that's going to build the whole entire experience. Anyway, kind of like performance scores. Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, I cannot believe like whole swing dancing Shapiro is actually relatable. And yeah, like I do agree with the social like aspect of it. And I think for me, like this rule-based thing is really just kind of like I think what I've been exploring with all of this. I think I have a very like structure or like rule-based kind of mindset. And for me, like creating improv is always creating rules that you can break. This is why for me, whether it's jazz dancing, whether it's like doing stand-up comedy or it's doing live coding, it's always been like trying to like figure out like what this rule system is that's at play, and then like what's the limitation and like what's the freedom. So I think it's mostly for me, it's always like iterating on these systems and these rules that we're able to like play within. And I think in the line of like performance and or immersive theater, I really think about how this like immersive concept can scale, not necessarily scale up, but just like scale in different ways. I think, and like ways that we can like actually like engage people into our things. And also another cool thing about social dancing, I think it's like the consent to touch is sometimes is like very nonverbal, and it's like very like fluid, and like you have this like social context within that like you lure people in. It's almost like an invisible onboarding where like when people enter the space and then like enter your realm, like you establish this communication connection that like doesn't have to be like very explicit. And I wonder if like that can happen in live coding where like we can get people to interact and permission to explore, for the audience to become performers without like having to announce it.
Um, I think the dream, I I think like that, yeah, I kind of agree with Viola in terms of like there is like no like the dream one ideal to framework. And the way that we also present our project is also like making like a different iteration as well. So like also like with that idea, we actually rooted from like a kind of oral history. It's like slightly changed every time that we present. So like added new idea always. So like we be like, let's say like the JIT project we've been presented for like 2 years, 3 years already, which is like from the beginning until now is like totally different version of it. So yeah, but like I mentioned in my presentation, what we wanted to include more is like something that can include like different languages into like the data set of the visual, but also I think like the dream framework that, because I present here in Bangkok and also in US, is kind of like always like different languages between the two. So I hope like there is like a easy framework to be fluid in that languages, but translation is not always exact. So yeah.
Thank you for answering it. This was a very great conversation. I can see this conversation is being done many times offline and all that. So thank you very much. And that will end this session. And also, if you want to know everything from the past sessions are on the website, and even the past editions, all the links from the YouTube links and all that are there. So yeah. And then the next session would be moderated by Kate, and it was going to be a great one. At the moment, I cannot think of the name, but it is there.
I think it's Live Coding as Life.
Yes, Live Code and Life, yeah.
And stay tuned for the link since none of my links that I set up are working. But we will get it out as soon as we start streaming. And thank you to all the presenters in this session. This was amazing. This was fantastic. And this is why I love hybrid live coding. Thank you all so much.